So I'm adding more commentary to this than I usually do when I'm just focusing on summarizing papers, but it's important because the story is building towards understanding how IPCC as a boundary organization is doing in terms of negotiating everything with governments. Is it going astray a little bit in terms of trying to meet the demanded temperature target? Governments say, let's focus on this, or economist Bill Nordhaus says 2 degrees is a good number, and it gets politically assimilated. Then can the models just say this is not possible, or do they have to bend over backwards and make assumptions that are not realistic for the models themselves and issue pathways for the future? This is a big debate, and it's a very legitimate debate because we are talking about many regrettable decisions possible from mitigation and adaptation, maladaptation, or investing in things that may turn out to be a disaster. We are colonizing the future in many ways. We have already emitted so much carbon and already changed the pathways for the future for posterity, and now we're trying to correct ourselves, and we're going to make more changes with potential unintended consequences. Well, everything we've done has had unintended consequences anyway. Okay, coming back to summary of SSP narratives. Obviously it had SSP 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, so let's read them carefully just so that you know how science and natural science, climate science, earth system science is being mixed with socioeconomic social science, which is a debate as to which particular aspect of science is more predictable or projectable, if we want. So SSP1 focuses on sustainability, taking the green road. So here is low challenges to mitigation and adaptation if you end up going there, so that you are on a safe path and reaching less than 2 degrees C target with some probability. The world shifts gradually but pervasively toward a more sustainable path, emphasizing more inclusive development that respects perceived environmental boundaries. Management of global commons slowly improves educational and health investments, accelerate the demographic transition, and the emphasis on economic growth shifts towards a broader emphasis on human well-being. Driven by an increasing commitment to achieving development goals, inequality is reduced both across and within countries. Consumption is oriented towards low material growth and lower resource and energy intensity. Fantastic scenario if it can materialize, and we have to be optimistic that maybe that's where we will head, even though the chaos that has been going on for last many years with wars in several places and hegemonies, competitions for resources, colonization of poor continents like Africa for various resources and so on, make you wonder whether human behavior can really allow us to go in this direction. Middle of the road SSP2 provides medium challenges to mitigation and adaptation. The world follows a path in which social, economic and technological trends do not shift markedly from historical patterns, so our lifestyle is going to somehow change while doing things as usual. Development and income growth proceeds unevenly, with some countries making relatively good progress while others fall short of expectations. So the sustainability and inclusivity and equality are abandoned here a little bit. Okay, global and national institutions work toward but make slow progress in achieving sustainable development goals. Environmental systems experience degradation, although there are some improvements, and overall the intensity of resource and energy use declines. Global population growth is moderate and levels off in the second half of the century. Income inequality persists or improves only slowly, and challenges to reducing vulnerability to societal and environmental changes remain. This looks more like the real world, where renewable investments by countries even like China and India, in addition to rich countries Germany, Denmark, Netherlands, US, European continent in general, provide some sense that energy use and overall intensity of resource use maybe declining in some places at least, but growth is very uneven. Population growth is moderate. Fertility rates have peaked a while ago. Peak population is reached by China already. Maybe India will reach that one of these days, and so on and so forth. So we have to also see what RCPs they correspond to. So if you remember the AR6 summaries I already did before doing this, I started doing this for a different purpose, but nonetheless you see that we mix and match RCPs and SSPs. So we will see that again a little bit. SSP3 focuses on regional rivalry. So this is a rocky road with high challenges to mitigation and adaptation. A resurgent nationalism, concerns about competitiveness and security, and regional conflicts push countries to increasingly focus on domestic or at most regional issues. This is playing out exactly this way with Russian invasion of Ukraine, NATO and Western world aligning behind Ukraine, India trying to stay neutral or non-committal because it has close alliance with Russia, trade with Ukraine, China aligned with Russia. So this is all a complicated mishmash of how cooperations happen between countries. Okay. Policies shift over time to become increasingly oriented toward national and regional security issues. This is also relevant for climate action. If each country is doing its own climate action, will it add up to a national, a global betterment of meeting feasibility of meeting global warming targets? That's not always so obvious. Countries focus on achieving energy and food security goals within their own regions at the expense of broader based development. So this is what we mean. Each country has its own priorities in terms of energy, economic growth, GDP growth, etc. Investments in education and technological development decline. Economic development is slow. Consumption is material intensive, and inequalities persist or even worsen over time. This is playing out also in terms of climate change, resource limitations, and regional rivalries, ethnic tensions playing together to create problems like the refugees running around in Syria or the Rohingyas being pushed around, and so on. Population growth is low in industrialized and high in developing countries. A low international priority for addressing environmental concerns leads to strong environmental degradation in some regions. So these are much more descriptive and discursive compared to RCPs and SRES, because these are really social science, socio-political, socioeconomic narratives, and social problems, often socioeconomic problems, tend to be defined in descriptive languages, and solutions also tend to be presented in descriptive languages, which we are seeing here in terms of the narratives. SSP for inequality, a road divided, low challenges to mitigation, high challenges to adaptation. What does it mean? Basically, that means mitigation challenges can come from, let's say, bioenergy, land use, food security, water security conflicts, deployment of solar and wind with land requirements, or doing other mitigations like switching to EVs or public transportation, and so on and so forth. So these are narratives that are imagined to take a certain pathway in the phase space of adaptation challenges low to high, mitigation challenges low to high. You end up with middle of the road SSP2 and then SSP 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, based on where the mitigation challenges and adaptation challenges are. I've described this elsewhere in another podcast that you can look at it. Doing this by hand is a little bit funny, but hopefully you can imagine. Okay. Highly unequal investments in human capital combined with increasing disparities in economic opportunities and political power lead to increasing inequalities and stratification both across and within countries. So climate change will really begin to create winners and losers, which has already happened and is happening. Over time, a gap widens between an internationally connected society that contributes to knowledge and capital intensive sectors of the global economy and a fragmented collection of lower income, poorly educated societies that work in a labor intensive, low tech economy. which is already what we are living with. Social cohesion degrades and conflict and unrest become increasingly common. As the old saying goes, peace breaks out, war doesn't break out. We generally say war broke out, but there's always wars going on. Sometimes you have periods of peace. So this is what is normality, normal situation. Technology development is high in the high-tech economy and sectors. Globally connected energy sector diversifies, and with investments in both carbon-intensive fuels like coal and unconventional oil, but also low-carbon energy sources. Environmental policies focus on local issues around middle and high income areas. So then the world is basically divided into poor countries, global south being on its own, fending its own, and serving labor demand for rich countries which are focused on environmental policies and local issues and not necessarily carrying the global population with it. How will loss and damage, etc., play out in these scenarios where flooding in Pakistan or typhoon damage in Philippines are related to global warming, but whether we will account for it and pay for it. Fossil fueled development, SSP 5, is like a baseline business as usual kind of scenario. This is taking the highway, high challenges to mitigation and low challenges to adaptation. This world places increasing faith in competitive markets, innovation, and participatory societies to produce rapid technical progress and development of human capital as a path to sustainable development. Global markets are increasingly integrated. There are also strong investments in health, education, and institutions to enhance human and social capital. Everything sounds good except it is fossil fueled. Okay. At the same time, the push for economic and social development is coupled with the exploitation of abundant fossil fuel resources and adoption of resource and energy intensive lifestyles around the world. So if there is lots of resources in terms of financial income and expenditure by governments and per capita income, because everybody is burning fossil fuels like hell, then challenges to adaptation can be low. You build seawalls, you buy air conditioners to deal with heat waves, and you do lots of things to deal with floods, and food is somehow produced somewhere and brought to everybody in the market with whatever price, and so on and so forth. Okay. All these factors lead to rapid growth of the global economy while global population peaks and declines in the 21st century. Local environmental problems like air pollution are successfully managed. There is faith in the ability to effectively manage social and ecological systems, including by geoengineering if necessary. So this is a utopia with a lot of dystopia in it. What will happen if we keep burning fossil fuel? Will we be able to reach carbon capture scales so that we'll just suck out CO2 from the atmosphere like Coca-Cola and then utilize it for producing things, or hide it somewhere deep in geological fault lines or deep in the ocean, and so on and so forth? Is it possible? Well, it's as possible as SSP1, I suspect. Okay, so let's look at some of the drivers maybe in the next podcast, because this is already about 13 minutes. So let me leave it here and look at some of the drivers used by the integrated assessment models to do these marker scenarios and the multiple other scenarios in the table that we looked at. We looked at the number of scenarios run by different models. There are technical reasons why and computational reasons sometimes as to why each model doesn't run the same number of scenarios. So scenarios are all the same, and whoever runs it has to run it exactly by that protocol, so that results from different models can be combined, compared and combined, and then some sort of a compromise is made in presenting them for the future, and so on. Okay, so let me leave this here and come back and wrap it up in the third podcast.